Recording. Okay, so this is, I believe, class number 4 on Mishlei, and the we did the. Let's just do a quick review to put us in the place that we're in right now. So we talked about what the book of Mishlei is. We talked last week about the whole concept of flashes of light. We talked about that the Mishalim, that all the examples that were given are really ultimately flashes of light in order for us to be able to understand greater truths. And we spoke about who wrote the book of Mishlei, about the introduction that Shlomo Melech had to give his credentials, his 3 credentials, because there are basically 3 ideas and 3 books of Mishlei. There are 3 sections. There's Chachma, there's wisdom, there's Musa, there's discipline, and then Lahavinim Rebino, then there's understanding. Then we spoke about, then this is where we'll pick it up. We spoke about the 3 ways. The other way of understanding the opening of Mishlei is that we know that there are 3 ways to acquire truth, and Shlomo Melech used all 3. One is Nevuah, through prophecy. The other is Misora, is through tradition, receiving it from previous generations. And then the third is experimentation and experience. And Shlomo Melech defined himself in those 3 terms. Shlomo, which was, he is a prophet, Ben David, his lineage, and then Melech Yisrael was his, the fact that he had lived a life as king of Israel. He experienced many things and experimented with many things. Okay, those are the first 2 psukim of Mishlei. And I'm hoping that everybody has a text in front of them. Tonight, the text is going to be important. And again, if you don't have a text in front of you, just go to Sefaria and go into Google, type in Mishlei Sefaria and chapter 1, and then you play around with it on the top, and you can get both English and Hebrew, and the text is going to be important. So the question now is on verse 3. Once Shlomo Melech has said who he is and what this book is, so then verse 3, which is where we'll start tonight, Lakachas Musar Haskel, is to accept wise discipline, tzedek umishpat umesharim, justice and righteousness, justice and mesharim, and fairness. Those are the goals of this book. But what's being added to Pasuk Beis? Because Pasuk Beis told me, the second verse told me, that what is the purpose of my Mishalim? The purpose of my Mishalim is Ladas Chachma Umusar, Lahavinim Rebina. That's verse 2. Then verse 3 says, Lakachas Musar, which sounds exactly the same as Ladas Chachma Musar. Lakachas Musar Haskel, which is wise discipline, Tzedek Umishpat Umesharim. What's being added in that verse to what we already know? I think that I have to stop here for a second and explain something about the book of Mishlei. Now, the truth is, tonight, on 2 levels, I might get a little technical, but you'll understand by the time I finish that the technicalities are there really just to explain the format of Mishlei, which will then help us in explaining and in understanding all of the verses. Mishlei is written, with a certain rhythm. And the rhythm is da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You have a stop in the middle of a pasuk, in the middle of a verse. The first half is tu-do-do-do, ta-ta-do-do, and then the second half is ta-da-do-do-do-do-do. And they're almost like mirrors in rhythm. It's mirrors of each other. And very often in concept, it's also mirrors of each other. The question that we're always going to have to ask is that if there are different words that are being chosen or different modifiers from the one to the other, we're going to have to explain why specifically, and I'll do this in a few minutes, but why specifically this word is modified by this and this word is modified by that. And when you start to uncover this, you'll realize that most of the message in Mishlei is way beyond the surface of the verses themselves. And that there is incredible things to get from just understanding the way that Shlomo Melech chose the words that he chose to use. So if you look at this, in verse number 2, it says, Ladas Chochma Musar, to know wisdom and understanding, Lahavin, to understand, Imre Bina, the words of understanding. If you look at that very carefully, you'll see that the first two words are modified by the word ladas, to know X and Y. And then lahavin, to understand Z. Why is chachma and musar, wisdom and discipline, why is that connected to ladas, to know? And imre bina is connected to lahavin. So, and then in the next verse, in verse 3, it says, Lakachas musar haskel, to take wise discipline, tzedek umishpat umisharim. So in the one it's to know, in the one it's to understand, and then in verse 3, it's to lakachas, to take. What's the difference? Does everybody understand the question that I'm asking? This is actually critical because we're going to ask questions like this a lot. In verse 3, he says, ladas, to know, chachma musa. Lahavin, to understand, imre bina. Lakachas, musar haskot tzadik mishpat misharim. What are those things that we're supposed to cull from this book? And why is some of them we're calling it ladas, to know, some to understand, and some lakachas, to take? So I think it's very important to understand the following thing, that das and bina are two very different things. There is a difference between knowing things and between internalizing things. Ladas and lahavin are two levels of understanding. But lakachas means that you have to internalize it. You see, to have chachma and musar, to have wisdom and to have discipline, you need to understand things. You need ladas. You need to know what you need to know, to be in tune with with these things, to understand what wisdom is, to understand what musar is, to understand imre vino. You have to have a deeper understanding. But in order to be able to do something with your life, to live your life with tzedek, with justice, and with righteousness, and with uprightness, with fairness, there you have to internalize the message. It's very easy to know things. It's very easy to say things. It's very easy to have an understanding of things. Much more complicated to internalize things. And internalizing them means that you live by them. I'll tell you something, which you all know. We're all watching all the same news and everything. But I was incredibly moved by something that happened recently. There's plenty what to worry about the Jewish people. Plenty what to worry about of whether we're going to be around for a long time or not. Because there seem to be so many Jews that are so disconnected from their Judaism. And every once in a while, you start to, to sort of look at large swaths of of the Jewish people, and you say, they have no future. And then you hear the following thing. You hear this Yarden Bibas, who's in captivity, who is told that if he converts to Islam, he's going to live a better life. That's what they told him. You know what his response was? I was born a Jew and I'm going to die a Jew. He's not a religious person. It's not a person who is necessarily, steeped deeply in Jewish tradition, but he understands what it is to be Jewish. And he doesn't just understand, but he's internalized the message of what it means to be a Jew. I look at someone like that and I say that's incredibly inspirational to me, because that we're going to be okay. Because if that's the center of our Jewish people, if that starts to get out to others, if people say this over and people talk about this, and this is what's inspirational to the Jewish people, then you know what? In the end of the day, we're going to be okay. Because, look, really, we know that God wants us to follow Torah mitzvahs. We all understand that. And you know where I'm coming from. But at the end of the day, He wants us to internalize the message of Torah mitzvahs, not just to be like robots and follow. He wants that the message is internalized. That's what Shlomo HaMelech, that's the whole purpose of his book, was not just that you should know things, but that you should be able to internalize them. And that is the reason why he wrote it in Mishalim. He wrote it in ways that you could get this inside, that you could internalize this message. So what is it that we're supposed to internalize? What we're supposed to internalize is three things: tzedek, mishpat, and mesharim. What's the difference between tzedek, mishpat, and mesharim? So tzedek is, we understand that tzedek, righteousness, is like chesed, like kindness, like going beyond the letter of the law, like having an emotional connection to things. Mishpat is justice. Mishpat is much more of following, adhering to the strict letter. And Mesharim is using all of that, tzedek and mishpat, of knowing where to apply chesed and where to apply gevura, where to apply strength and where to apply kindness. That manifests itself in Mesharim, in doing the right thing, in going the right way. And that's what Shlomo Melech is telling me, that the whole purpose of all of this is that you know it's become something internal. It's a part and a parcel of you. It can't be separated from you. It can't be extracted from you, to the extent that it allows you to be able to live in a way that you can stay on the straight and narrow, and at the same time you know when to give. And that's called being a yasher. That's called being straight. Moshe was sitting on top of a mountain, and the Amalekites are fighting with the Jews. So Moshe Rabbeinu was standing on top of the mountain, and it says whenever he lifted up his hands, the Jewish people would be winning, and when his hands would drop down, the Jewish people would be losing. And we understand that to mean that when they were looking up to the heavens and realizing that it was God that was the one that was making them successful, so then they were able to beat the Amalekites. When their hands would drop, when Moshe's hands would drop, that means they were looking to themselves and their own power and their own strength, and that's when they would lose. It's very difficult to hold your hands up for any extended period of time. I don't care how much you go to the gym. Yeah, it's not an easy thing. Moshe Rabbeinu was getting tired. So he had two people holding his hands. He had Joshua on the one side, and he had a fellow by the name of Hur on the other side. Now, who was Hur? Hur was his nephew, Miriam's child. You ever hear Hur? So I'll tell you, he played a big role. Because, when Moses delayed from coming down the mountain, and they thought that he was dead, so the people started to complain and say, Moses, our leader, has died, and they wanted a golden calf. They went to Hur. They went to the son of Miriam, and they said, build us a golden calf. And Hur said, "Over my dead body." And they said, "We're happy to oblige." And they killed him. Then they went to Aaron and they said to Aaron, "Build us a golden calf," Moshe's brother. And Aaron went and he said, "Okay, guys, go collect gold. Go collect gold, and we'll build something for you." And they went and they got the gold, and they got it so fast. Aaron, the reason why he told them to go get the gold was he had no intention of building them an idol. What he intended to do was that he intended to delay time. That by the time they would go and get the gold, he figured, look, these are Jews. You go asking for a donation, they'll come up with 10 reasons why not to give. Yeah, you don't have to worry. It's going to take them a long time to go get the gold. Well, the Torah describes how they broke it off the ears of their wives. Like they were so excited about this thing, they couldn't contain themselves. And they went and they built this thing, one, two, three. And in the meantime, Moshe didn't come down yet. Aaron knew that Moshe was not delayed. He knew that it was a miscalculation in time. People weren't listening. People thought that Moshe was dead. So Aaron just wanted to delay until Moshe Rabbeinu came back. So it didn't quite work out that way. And that's why the golden calf was built by Aaron, but it wasn't built intentionally by Aaron. Okay, let's go back to the two people that were holding his hands up. Why was it Aaron on the one side and Hur on the other? Who was
Rabbi,
yes,
Rabbi, I just wanted to say something about Aaron. Don't you think that it's just an excuse? What
well,
he's saying right now? I mean, the bottom line, he built it. I mean, let's not make excuses for him because he
right,
was wrong on building it. That's what
right.
I feel.
So you have to always look at intentions. In other words, you're right. You're right. He does share some of the guilt of the fact that he was involved, and he, by the way, he himself felt guilty.
How
How do
do
I
we
know
know
that?
that?
Oh,
Yeah.
because it says in the Torah that when the tabernacle was dedicated, the tabernacle was dedicated after the golden calf. As a matter of fact, the tabernacle was the antidote to the golden calf. Let's stop here for a second. Let's spend a little time on this. Ladies, do you know why the golden calf was built? Why did they? Why? First of all, it wasn't a calf that they wanted. Do you know what they wanted? They
They
didn't want an
wanted
idol.
a guide, like
New God
something
or
to
whatever.
reassure them.
Correct, correct. They didn't want a god. It wasn't about a god. It was about a guide. It was because they thought Moshe was dead. If Moshe is dead, Moshe is our focal point. See, what role did Moshe play in the mind of the average Jew? Moshe was the guy who you get to when you want to get to God. He was the secretary. And if I can't talk to the CEO, then let me at least talk to the secretary, and the secretary will talk to the CEO. That's what the role that Moshe started to play in the mind of the people. When they thought that Moshe was dead, so they said, we need another secretary for the CEO, which is God. They weren't denying God. They just needed something else to be able to get to God. It wasn't, now I have to rely on a medrash, but it's an amazing thing. It was not a golden calf that they were looking for. They were looking for some kind of intermediary, some kind of guide, not a god. So why did it turn out to be a golden calf? Okay, let's go back to Egypt. Let's go to the day before they were leaving Egypt. What were the Jews doing before they left Egypt? Before they made the Paschal Lamb, what were they doing? Bible for
And like
10.
the rams.
But before that, yes, that was one of the things they were doing. They were taking the goats and the sheep, tying them to their bedposts, getting ready for for the big day, right? For the day when they're going to sacrifice the Egyptian god and make a Paschal Lamb. But what else were they doing? They were going to all the Egyptians and asking them for money. They were telling them, "Give us money. We've been working for you for a long time." How did they know they had money? Because during the plague of darkness, says the Medrash, what were they doing? By the way, this is in the Torah. God says to them, "Go, please, and ask from your Egyptian neighbors their gold and their silver and their valuables." And how did they know they had these things? Because during the plague of darkness, when it was dark for the Egyptians, the Jews were finding all of their stuff. They didn't take it, of course, because they couldn't, but they went to them right before they left and asked them for the stuff. Okay, That's in the Torah, by the way. What was Moshe doing while they were doing that? Okay, do you remember that Jacob had promised them, don't bury me in Egypt? So they went to Israel after Jacob died and they buried him there. And then Joseph said to his brothers, don't leave Egypt without me. That if I'm dead, make sure you take my bones with me. That promise was passed on to every generation. Moses knew that he had to get the bones of Yosef. Where was he going to find the bones of Yosef? Because Pharaoh was a smart fella. Pharaoh took the bones of Joseph and sunk them in the Nile so that he knew that Moses wouldn't be able to find it, and therefore the Jews would never be able to leave. There was a lady by the name of Serach Bas Asher, who, the daughter of one of the 12 tribes of Asher, she knew where the bones were buried. She told Moshe exactly where it was. Now, how's Moshe going to do a salvage thing? He has no hoist, he has no lift. How's he going to get it out of the Nile? He knew where the bones were. Now we knew where the sarcophagus was, but how was he going to get it out? So he wrote God's name on a piece of pottery. And on one side, he wrote God's name, God's ineffable name, a 72-letter name of God. On the other side, he wrote the words, Alei Shor, Alei Shor. Now, what do those words mean? Arise, O ox, arise, O ox. Now, why did he write those words? Because when Jacob gave his blessings to the tribes, the blessing that he gave to Joseph is he called him a shor. He called him an ox. And that was the description of Yosef, a bechor shor hodalo. And that's again in the Torah. And Yosef is known and associated with an ox for variety of reasons, not for now. So Moshe wrote on this thing, Alei Shor, arise, O ox, which is a reference to Yosef. He threw it into the Nile, and the bones of Yosef rose to the top. The Jews are collecting all of the money. Moshe is collecting the mitzvahs. He's collecting the bones of Yosef, and now they're ready to leave Egypt. There were two guys on the side of the river that were watching Moshe do this. Their names were Dasan and Aviram, Datan Vaviram, and those two guys were no good nicks from the very beginning. Do you remember when Moses killed the Egyptian, and there were two Jews that saw him, and they went and they told Pharaoh that they told that you know what Moshe did? He killed an Egyptian. You know who those two guys were? Dasan and Aviram. You know, in the desert, when the manna fell and God said, don't take more manna than you need, take 1 day's portion and that's it, they took more. And when God said, don't collect manna on Shabbos, what did they do? They went to collect manna on Shabbos. These guys were schlechters. These were bad folk. They saw...
Rabbi, sorry, it just begs the question, if so many Jews didn't leave with Moses, why did they?
You ask the question the commentaries ask. The commentaries say, why don't we just leave these two guys behind? They should have stayed with the other with the other 3 million. A simple answer is because the reason why those 3 million didn't go is because they had no interest in being connected to the Jews. These guys were nefarious. They had their own self-serving. But at the end of the day, they wanted to be connected to the Jewish people. They still wanted to go into the land of Israel. They still wanted to be part of them. They were messed up. They were totally perverted in their views, but nevertheless, they still stayed connected to the Jewish people, which is, by the way, an incredible lesson. That sometimes it doesn't matter how messed up a person is, but as long as you stay connected to the Jewish people, that's the main thing. Okay, so Dasan and Aviram, they see Moshe throw this thing into the river, and they take it and they say, we have no idea what this might be good for, but for sure this is going to come in handy one day. Fast forward now to the golden calf. Aaron is collecting all the gold and the silver and the earrings and the nose rings that they're breaking off of their wives' ears and noses. and he puts it inside of a pot and they start to melt it. And they go and they throw in this piece of pottery that says, Ale Shor, arise, O ox, arise, O ox. And out of that melting gold comes that golden calf. That was a miracle. It was clearly because it was something that God wanted. He wanted them to experience this because they we needed this as a paradigm and a constant reminder to us of what happens when we start to doubt God. Okay, story for another time. Be that as it may, so here we have the golden calf and we have an Aaron. Aaron was very worried that he was involved in this. His intentions were good, but he was very worried that he was involved in this. Fast forward, God says to them, you couldn't see me. You couldn't see me. You saw me through Moses. That's not a good thing. You built a golden calf because you couldn't see me. You wanted to use that as a way to get to me. That's not the way to get to me. Do you want to know how to get to me? I'll tell you. Build me a temple. Build me a tabernacle. Build me a mikdash. Put an altar inside. Sacrifice animals. The whole system. That's the way you're going to see me. That's why God gave us the mikdash. The commandment for the mikdash, according to many commentaries, is only because of the golden calf. Had we not built the golden calf, we would not necessarily have had a Beit HaMikdash. We would not have had a central temple. But we needed it now because we couldn't just open our eyes and see God everywhere. We had to have focal points. So God told us, if you need a focal point, this is the way to build your focal point. On the day of the inauguration of the temple, God said to Aaron, Aaron, go and sacrifice your offering. And the offering was to atone for the sin of the golden calf. And if you look carefully in the Torah says God commands Aaron twice to go up. And the commentaries explain, why did God have to command him to go up twice? Because Aaron was embarrassed. Here he was asking for forgiveness and atonement for the Jewish people for the golden calf, and the sin is on him. And God said to Aaron, go up and do it. Because lekach nivcharta, this is why you were chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people. Because you were able to take responsibility for this. You were able to look at your role in this and recognize that it's not a good thing. That's a great leader. You go ahead and you go you go do your job. Like, don't worry, you're going to be forgiven. It's going to be fine. You follow, Yellow? So at the end of the day, he is responsible for it. But he was responsible only because he had a hand in it, but not the golden calf was not his idea. You have to put the whole thing in context. Okay. Now, back to the main game. So Moses is on the mountain, and he's got two guys holding up his hands, Aaron and Hur. Now, these were two opposites. Who was Aaron? Aaron was what we call an Oev Shalom v'Rodef Shalom. He loved peace and he pursued peace. He was loved by every single member of Klal Yisrael, every single member, because all he did was made peace between people. Our rabbis tell us that what he did was he would see two people fighting. He would go over to the one guy and he would say, I know you're having a fight with this guy. I want you to know he really wants to say he's sorry, but he's a little bit too proud and he can't say he's sorry to you. And he would go to the other guy and he would say, look, I know you're fighting with that other guy, but he's a little bit too proud. He wants to say he's sorry, but he can't say he's sorry. Each one of them, when they heard that the other guy was willing to back down, they were good. It took care of it. And they were able to go to each other and make peace. And this is what Aaron did. He went around from strife to strife, from person to person, from husband to wife, from parent to child. And all he did was, he was an Oev Shalom v'Rodef Shalom. He loved peace and he pursued peace. Hur, on the other hand, was your tough guy. He was no nonsense Hur. They came to him and said, build a golden calf. He said, no, we're going to kill you. Kill me. What do I care? He was a tough guy. He wasn't giving in for a minute. He was a great guy, but he was a tough guy. Look who Moshe had on either side. Moshe had tzedakah on one side, mishpat on the other side. He had righteousness on the one side, Aaron. He had justice, strictness on the other side, Hur. And who was in the middle? Meisharim, Yashar, straight, Moshe. Because Moshe knew how to integrate the toughness and integrate the softness and put them together for perfection. And that perfection is called Yashrus, Yashar, Yesharim, to know how to live a straight life. Remember we spoke about Eshes Chayil? And at the very end of the book of Mishlei, King Solomon wrote Eshes Chayil, the woman of valor. One of the things it says in the Eshes Chayil, Tsemer ufishtim, that a woman knows how to put together Tsemer ufishtim, wool and linen. Wool and linen. What is that? She knows how to make a nice garment. She knows how to sew very nice. Yay, that's my woman of valor. What is that talking about? You know what Tsemer ufishtim is? Tsemer is soft. Pishtim, flax, is coarse. The woman, the Eshes Chayil, knows how to integrate the softness and the harshness and to put them together to make yashrus, to make yasha, to make things straight, to do the right thing. That's the praise of the Jewish woman. It's not about wool and linen. It's about tzedek, mishpat, and yashar. And that's what King Solomon says. This is what you got to get out of this book. What you get out of this book is you have to understand what justice is. You have to understand what kindness is, and put those two together. Know when to use what characteristic. And that is Musar Haskel. That's what wise discipline is. That's what internalizing a message is knowing exactly when and how to appropriately use it. That requires a lot of work. That doesn't come easy. And that's why I'm going to tell it to you, says Shlomo, in Mishalim, in stories, in parables, in little ditties, in cute little poetry, because to get it inside is not simple. In the Shema, we say, V'hoyu advarim ha'ela, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, that the things that I'm commanding you today have to be, anybody know the next words? Depending on which paragraph. Say it again.
Al levavcha ve'al nafshecha.
Al levavchem. That's right, it's got to be on your heart. What do you mean on your heart? Wouldn't it have been smarter to say in your heart? In your heart means internalized. So why al levavcha? What do you think? Huh?
Whether you're talking about kindness?
Yeah, everything that I've told you today in the Shema, it means everything that I've told you today. All the words of the Torah, all the messages, all the ideas, all the characteristics, everything I want from you. Where do you have to place it? You have to place it al levavcha. Al levavcha means on your heart. But it should be, based on what I'm saying, that it should be inside your heart. Betoch levavchem, not al levavchem. Because sometimes to get it into the heart, you got to just put it on top of the heart and then let it seep in. Because you can't just stoop it into the heart. You can't just push it into the heart and say, oh, that's it, I've internalized it. Sometimes you got to put it there. You got to think it. You got to live it. You got to consider it. You got to worry about it. You got to wash it over yourself. And then eventually it sinks in. And when it sinks in, then it's betoch, then it's inside of your heart. This is the book of Mishlei. Every message that Shlomo Melech is giving us, he could give us between the eyes. He could inject it into the heart. but that's not going to do it. It's got to be put on the heart. It's got to be put there. And then we have to consider it, think about it, and eventually it'll seep in. Tzedek, Mishpat, Umesharim. Everybody understands that model. Tzedek, softness, righteousness, goodness. Mishpat, toughness. When you integrate the two of them, Yashar. By the way, we have the same model by Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avraham, softness. Yitzchak, tough guy. And Yaakov, who is called, by the way, Tiferet, which means beauty, or Emet, which is truth, which is when you take those two and you integrate them together. Which, just as an aside, every three that we have in Judaism fits into that model. Tough, soft, integrated into the middle, into perfection. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Shabbos, Tefillin, Mezuzah. I could keep going. Torah, Avoda, Gemilut Chasadim.
Maybe father, mother, son.
Father, Mother, God. Father, Mother, God would fall into that. But every three that we have, and we have a million threes, every three falls into this. This is the makeup of Judaism. Two extremes, and the beauty is when you take the extremes and you put them together. It's the reason why in Pirkei Avos we always say, and they said three things. Why three things? Because those three things set the model. It's a triangle. Two extremes come together in the middle. Okay. I'm going to stop here. I don't know where this time goes. The next piece that I have is going to take a long time, so we'll do that the next time. Two things I want to say. I'll give you a little introduction to it in a second. I think next week I want to talk about Purim. If I can find some way to tie it into Mishlei, I will. I don't have to though, because I think Purim is very important to understand the spiritual side of Purim. You know, that I'm not concerned with the other stuff. The legal side, you know, you can go read what you have to do on Purim, give Shachmanas, hear the Megillah, you know, go have a nice time. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff on Purim is what's Purim saying to me? What am I supposed to be working on Purim? What am I supposed to be thinking about? And I want to talk about that a little bit next week. But the next time we hit Mishlei, I want you to look at the next two verses. Look at verse 4 and 5. Everything we talk about tonight comes like to crescendo now, because now Shlomo Melech has to tell us who his audience is and what the audience needs to get. Lo seis, you see it? Latate. La pitoyim arma, to give the pitoyim, the fools, arma, cleverness, linar, to the youth, das umezima, knowledge and design, yishma chacham v'yosef lekach, to the wise an increase in learning, v'novon tachbulos yikne, and to the wise one, strategies they will acquire. Now look at those two verses. First of all, let's get the rhythm of the verses. Let's say slapsoyim arma, lenar dasum azima. Yishma chacham v'yosef lekach, v'novon tachbulos yikne. You follow? Da-da-da-da-da-da, 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 da-da-da-da-da. So what are those balances? That's the first thing. The second thing is look at the words that are used for what each one is going to get and how who he is, what he's going to get, and how he's going to get it. So the first one is laseis, to give. Who are you giving this to? The psoyim, the fool. And what are you giving the fool? You're giving him cleverness. The second one you're giving to is a nar. And what are you giving him? Das. And how are you giving it? Das and mizima. You're going to giving it with cleverness. Yishma chacham, yishma, to hear, the wise person, v'yosef lekach, and he'll be smarter. And the navon, tachbulos, with you're going to give him strategies, yikna, he's going to acquire. So if I look at it carefully, we're talking about four people: a pesi, a nar, a chacham, a navon. To one of them we're losses, we're giving it to him. Two of them were losses. One of them were yishma, we're making him hear. And one of them were yikna, making him acquire. And what is it that we're giving them? To one we're giving arma, street smarts. One we're giving him dasu mizima, understanding. One we're giving Yosef Lekach, smarts. And the other we're giving bina, we're giving understanding. What is that about? Who are these four people? Why are they each getting it differently? Why don't I give it to them exactly the same? Each one of them, the Pesi I give, the Nar I give, the Chacham I give, the Novan I give.
It's
Why
like the
each
four
one of them is,
sons.
say again?
Like the four sons.
Like the four, oh, very good. Like the four sons. What we're going to learn is that there are four ways, there are four types of people in this world. And we're going to learn how to deal with all of these four types. Anyway, it's amazing, but we'll get there, God willing, in 2 weeks. Okay, so next week.
Rabbi, one quick question.
Yes.
Because like you were telling us about those two men that were, with Moses and all of that.
That's enough here. That's correct.
Yeah.
By the way, just let me stop you for 1 second.
Yeah.
If you ever saw the Ten Commandments, the original movie of the Ten Commandments, so there was a famous actor called Edward G. Robinson, and he played Dathan. And every time I hear the name Dasan, the picture of Edward G. Robinson comes into my head. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you said that they did go anyway because they like had some sort of connection or whatever.
Right.
Can you think of any way that there could be a parallel to all the Jewish people supporting that are pro-Palestinian? I mean, on one hand, they are saying that they're Jewish, but on the other hand, they're messing things up, right?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what the end of these guys. The end is that they got involved in a rebellion called Korach, the Korach rebellion, and they ended up dying. So, they were needed in the desert. God didn't leave them in Egypt. They were needed, for their wickedness, because we needed that also in order to be able to climb away from that wickedness. For the rest of the Jewish people to climb away from that wickedness. So wickedness is necessary in the world. It's not unnecessary. Evil is not unnecessary. God created evil also. Borei or v'choshech. God created light and darkness, because the only way you can really see the light is when there's darkness. So there has to be the evil. But nevertheless, it's still evil. So no, I can't see a justification for those people that they haven't been taken out yet. But in other words, there's no justification for people that are supporting the enemy and that are harming Jews. There's no justification for that.
But somehow could it be necessary?
I guess, in the bigger picture, it's necessary so that we confront evil and see it, so that we know to stay away from it. But nothing more than that. And I'd be happy to do without that also. I don't really need that. Okay, amazing. All right, so I put up the second class online. I have to fix it up a little bit. But I put up the second class, and then the beginning of next week I'll put up the third one, and then I'll put up the fourth one. So I'm basically like 2 weeks behind. So the second one is now up now, and then last week's class will go up next, and I'll just keep putting them up. They're on my YouTube channel, and I will send a link to it once it's up and finished. I'll send a link on the chat, on the class chat. I'll send it on there also. Okay, amazing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Thank
ladies.
you.
Have a good day. It's good to
You
see
have a
all.
good night.
Okay. Have a good week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.